Okay, so let's just paint a picture here. The date is February 23rd, 1944.
Right.
And you are sitting at, what, 25,000 feet above occupied Germany. The air outside is 40 degrees below zero.
And that's not just chilly. We should be clear. That is the kind of cold that freezes exposed skin in seconds.
Instantly, yeah. It's an environment that's trying to kill you before the enemy even gets a shot.
Oh, for sure. At that altitude, your oxygen mask fails. You've got maybe, 2 minutes of useful consciousness before you just pass out.
And you're strapped into the left seat of a B-17 Flying Fortress, the Yankee Doodle. You are Lieutenant John Morgan. You're 23, and your plane isn't just damaged. It's a falling torch.
Flying coffin, that's what the crews called them. And in this moment, it was absolutely living up to that name.
But this deep dive isn't really just about a plane crash. We've got flight logs, combat reports, a whole stack of post-war interviews here. And our mission is to analyze a very specific, a very terrifying window of time. 4 minutes.
It's just 4 minutes.
We're going to look at how a single decision made in that tiny window defined the line between life and death for 10 men. And really unpack the mechanics of leadership when every single system around you has failed.
And what I find so compelling here is that it forces you to look past the sort of action movie version of the war. We have to dig into the engineering, the psychology, the brutal statistics of the 8th Air Force to really get why Morgan did what he did.
So let's set that scene. This isn't just one plane flying alone. The Yankee Doodle is part of this huge formation, 300 bombers.
300, all heading for a Messerschmitt factory in Regensburg.
In the combat box formation.
The combat box, yeah.
Which wasn't just a random cluster of planes. It was designed, stacked at different altitudes, to create this defensive structure.
Theoretically, yes. It created a wall of machine gun fire, a wall of lead. But the major problem with a formation that tight is that the second you fall out of it, you're alone.
You're a target.
You are the target, and the Luftwaffe knew it. By 44, their tactics were honed. You'd have FW-190s coming in like wolves to break up the groups, and then a wave of Messerschmitt Bf-109s would come in to finish off the stragglers.
I can't even imagine the noise. I was reading that the vibration from the engines of hundreds of planes was enough to rattle your teeth. It's just a total sensory overload.
It's physically exhausting just to sit there for hours.
And then it happens. 10:18 a.m. A Bf-109 commits to a head-on pass. And the physics of that are just terrifying.
The closure rate is insane. You've got 2 aircraft coming at each other at a combined speed of maybe 600 or 700 miles an hour.
So the gunners have, what, a second to track and fire?
Barely. It's a game of chicken. And this time, the German pilot doesn't blink.
He puts a 20-millimeter cannon shell right through the nose of the Yankee Doodle. And the damage is, well, it's immediate. And it's catastrophic.
The shell just shatters the plexiglass nose. It kills the bombardier, David Kleen, instantly. Incapacitates the navigator, Robert Walsh.
But it doesn't stop. It punches through to the cockpit floor, shreds the hydraulic lines.
Which is a complete nightmare. No hydraulics means you lose all your power assist for the controls. But much worse, the shell fragments ignite the fuel lines for engines number 1 and number 2. The whole left wing is on fire.
So now the plane is fundamentally unbalanced. You've got full power on the right and just fire and drag on the left. The aerodynamics are just screaming for the plane to roll over and die.
And Morgan is just wrestling with it. He's hauling on that yoke with all his strength, just trying to keep the wings level. But this is where the one specific mechanical failure happens that changes everything.
The intercom lines.
The shell severed the intercom lines.
Seems like such a small detail compared to a wing on fire, but it's the whole story.
It's the most critical failure of all. A B-17 is a huge machine, 75 feet long. It's unpressurized, it's windy, it's deafeningly loud. You can't just shout to the guys in the back.
Right, you've got the waist gunners, the tail gunner. They're completely isolated back there. They feel the plane shaking, they see smoke, but they have no idea the cockpit is being incinerated.
And the pilot has a tool for this, the bailout bell. It's a dedicated alarm to order the crew to jump, but the lines are cut. The bell is dead.
So is the intercom.
The intercom is dead. He has no way to tell them to get out.
So this is the calculus, right? While his boots are probably getting hot. If he saves himself, which he has every right to do, the plane is done for. He just jumps out his side window.
But what happens to the plane the second he lets go of that control stick?
It goes into a spin.
An immediate, violent spin. And that's just physics. The centrifugal force would pin the men in the back of that plane against the fuselage walls. They'd be plastered to the side of the aircraft.
They wouldn't be able to move. They couldn't crawl to the escape hatches.
Never. So if Morgan bails out now, he is effectively executing everyone in the rear of his plane.
So the clock starts. 4 minutes. Morgan and his co-pilot, James Chen, they just look at each other. They can't speak. The headsets are dead. But they make a pact.
It's completely nonverbal. Morgan basically signals to Chen, you go, I'll stay. He's going to fight the controls to keep this platform stable for as long as he can.
And Chen has to physically run or crawl to the back to get the crew out.
And running through a B-17 is not like running down a hallway.
Not at all.
You have to get out of the cockpit, navigate this tiny catwalk through the bomb bay, which is open to that freezing slipstream, by the way, and then get to the waste gunners. And the plane is bucking and full of smoke.
So while he's doing that, Morgan is alone. Let's talk about minute 1. The plane is dropping 500 feet a minute. The fire on the left wing, it's not just on the surface.
No, the source notes say the heat was so intense it was melting the aluminum skin. Aluminum melts at around 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
He could look out his left window and literally see the internal skeleton of the wing, the ribs, the spars glowing cherry red. He is watching his aircraft dissolve in real time.
And he's holding it steady with just brute strength. There are no computers here. It's all cables and pulleys. He's fighting the drag of 2 dead engines with sheer muscle.
He's basically holding up a 30-ton building that is trying its best to fall over.
Okay, minute 2. Chen's in the back. He finds the waist gunners, Rivera and Anderson, and physically shoves them towards the door. That's 2 men out. But he still has to get to the tail gunner.
And all this time, they're getting lower. They're passing 19,000 feet. The good news is the risk of, oxygen deprivation is fading. The bad news is the fire has reached the fuel tanks in the wing.
Which is the ultimate terror. He knows he's sitting on top of thousands of gallons of high-octane aviation fuel. It could detonate at any millisecond.
But he stays. He hasn't seen all the chutes yet. He's counting.
Minute 3. Chen comes scrambling back to the cockpit. He's done it. He's cleared the rear. He clips on his chute and looks at Morgan basically saying, okay, let's go. We're done here.
And this is the moment in the logs that just gets me every time. Morgan shakes his head, holds up his hand.
He tells him to count to 20.
Can you imagine the discipline that takes? The wing is literally glowing, the cockpit is full of smoke, and Morgan is still calculating safety margins. He knows if he lets go the instant Chen jumps, the plane might whip around and foul his parachute.
So he gives him a buffer. Count to 20.
It must have felt like an eternity. Chen jumps. Morgan counts. Now he is absolutely the last man on a dying machine.
And the machine has had enough. 3 minutes, 30 seconds. The sources describe a sound like a gunshot.
That's the main wing spar snapping. The structural beam just gives up, and the left wing, it folds upward at a 45-degree angle.
All the lift on that side just vanishes.
Instantly, and the plane snaps into that violent spin he had been fighting off for 4 minutes.
The G-forces slam into him. He's pinned in his seat. He has to claw his way out, just fighting gravity to get to the escape hatch.
He finally tumbles out right at the 4-minute mark. And the timing is just unbelievable. Seconds after his own chute opens, the Yankee Doodle just disintegrates in midair.
So if he'd waited another 10 seconds...
he would have been torn apart with it.
And as he's drifting down into Germany, hanging in his harness, he does something. He starts counting.
He counts the parachutes. 1, 2. He spots 9 white canopies against the sky.
9. He knew 2 men, Clean and Walsh, were lost in the initial blast.
Yeah.
But everyone else who could be saved was saved.
It's a perfect execution of his duty as a commander. But I think we should pivot here, because the context for why this one act of heroism is so important is kind of hidden in the statistics of the air war itself.
Right. The flying coffin stats.
Yeah.
You had to fly 25 missions to complete a tour and go home. What were the actual odds of making it?
About 35%.
Why?
Just think about that. You line up 3 10-man crews. Statistically, 2 of those crews are not going to finish their 25 missions.
And this brings up that idea of survivor bias, which is such a famous story from the war.
It is, and it applies so perfectly here. The military would look at the bombers that made it back to England, right? They'd see bullet holes all over the wings and the tail, and they'd think, okay, we need to add more armor to the wings and the tail.
Which makes perfect sense intuitively.
Yeah.
Reinforce where you see the damage.
But a statistician, Abraham Wald, he stopped them. He said, no, you're only looking at the survivors. The planes with holes in the wings and tail. They came back.
The planes that got hit in the engines? Or the cockpit?
They didn't come back. The data was missing because it was at the bottom of the English Channel or in a field in Germany. just like Morgan's plane.
So Morgan's specific experience, the cockpit being destroyed, the engine fire, that was exactly the kind of fatal damage that usually meant no survivors and therefore no data.
Precisely. And that ties into the specific crew positions. You mentioned the tail gunner, but let's talk about the ball turret gunner.
That glass bubble hanging off the belly of the plane.
It is the worst seat in the house. You are curled in a fetal position for 8 hours straight. And to get out, you have to electrically rotate the turret so the door lines up with the inside of the plane.
So if the power goes out...
You're trapped. You are just hanging there in that bubble. That's why Chen's run to the back was so critical. If that plane had started spinning a minute earlier, the ball turret gunner would have been tracked inside it all the way to the ground.
That's horrifying. So Morgan hits the ground, lands in Bavaria, and the story shifts from air combat to a survival thriller. He buries his chute and opens his escape kit.
The barter kit. I love the ingenuity of these.
Okay, so let's look at the inventory. He's got a silk map of Europe. Why silk?
It's just practicality. A paper map dissolves if it gets wet. It rustles. Imagine hiding in a bush while a German patrol walks by. Unfolding a paper map is a death sentence. Silk is silent.
Smart. He's got a compass disguised as a uniform button.
Yeah, classic spycraft. They take your gear, but they might leave your clothes. You just snap off the button, balance it on a pin, and it points north.
High-energy chocolate, German currency, and benzodrine tablets.
Amphetamines. Go pills. Because when you're being hunted, you can't afford to sleep.
So he has all the tools he needs to run. He knows Switzerland is about 180 miles away. He could just start hiking, but he doesn't.
No. He makes a decision that goes against all survival logic, but it makes perfect sense if you understand the crew culture. He stays to search for his men.
He spends that first night just wandering the woods, using a whistle signal, 3 short blasts.
He is risking capture every second he stays near that crash site. The Germans are everywhere. But a bomber crew was. They were a family in an aluminum tube. You don't leave family behind.
And it works. He finds Chen, then they find Rousseau, Hayes. Eventually 6 of them regroup in enemy territory.
Which is incredible, but it's also what gets them caught. A group of 6 men is much harder to hide than one.
They try to hole up in an abandoned hunting lodge, and a patrol surrounds them. Most surrender.
Which was the smart move. If you fight, you die.
Yeah.
But Morgan and another crewman, Jackson, they slip out the back and they make a run for it.
For 3 days. They're sleeping in barns eating raw potatoes. But they're caught trying to cross an open field. And this leads to an interrogation scene that I found really unexpected.
It's not the Hollywood villain thing at all. Morgan is brought before a Luftwaffe officer.
Who speaks perfect English.
And who already knows the whole story. The rest of the crew had already told them. The officer just looks at Morgan and says, "You stayed at the controls to allow your crew to escape."
And Morgan must be thinking, this is it.
But instead, the German officer just nods and he says, "I did what any commander would do."
Wow. A moment of chivalry in all that carnage.
It was. There was this strange professional respect between a lot of the pilots. They understood the machines, they understood the risk, and this officer respected the airmanship regardless of the uniform.
So Morgan is sent to Stalag Luft III, the famous Great Escape Camp.
The very same. He spends the next 15 months there. And it culminates in the Long March. In the dead of winter, 1945, they were forced to march 90 miles in a blizzard.
The sources say he went into that camp a healthy, athletic 175 pounds.
When he was liberated, he weighed 1 to 15. He was a skeleton.
He survives, he comes home, he's awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, but he apparently felt hollow about it.
Classic survivor's guilt. He looked at that medal, and all he saw were the faces of Klein and Walsh, the 2 men who didn't make it. He put the medal in a drawer and just never spoke about the war.
He just went back to his life, became an engineer, raised a family.
It's the ripple effect, though. That's what's so powerful. You save one life, you end up saving a whole universe.
There's a note here about O'Brien, his ball turret gunner.
O'Brien named his first son John after Morgan.
But the moment that really lands is the eulogy. Morgan passed away in 2003, and his co-pilot, James Chen, the man who ran to the back of that plane, he was 83 years old, and he stood up to speak.
And he said, "John Morgan gave me 58 years I wouldn't have had."
That just hits you.
And then he said, "My children and grandchildren wouldn't exist." That's the real math of survival. It wasn't just 9 men in parachutes. It's the hundreds of descendants living today because one man held a stick steady for 4 minutes in 1944.
Someone asked Morgan once, years later, if he was scared during those 4 minutes.
And of course he was terrified. But his answer is, for me, the perfect definition of leadership. He said responsibility overrode the fear. He didn't stay because he wanted to be a hero. He stayed because the job wasn't done.
It makes you look at those old black and white photos of the crews smiling by their planes completely differently.
They were just kids making these impossible choices.
And in a world where we obsess over data and survivor bias as these abstract concepts,
True leadership is often that invisible act. It's holding steady when everything is on fire just to give someone else a chance. It's the victory that never shows up in a spreadsheet.
one man, 4 minutes, 9 lives.
And a legacy that's still growing. It's a powerful story to remember.
That's our deep dive for today. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.